if you have an orientation for your team, so they can go ahead and get up to speed and make sure they have everything they need so that they're successful in their role and that you don't have high turnover and you're able to retain them longer. All right. So the very first thing when I mentioned like an orientation to somebody, it's it takes too much time. But you got to think about all the time it's going to save you. I see so many people say, oh, it's going to take too much time to create, but then they're still going over the same stuff for every single new hire. Or they're having one of their team members go over the same stuff for every single team member, especially if you're hiring for a consistent role, like a field worker, a house cleaner, a yard worker, handyman, a hairstylist, a cell phone store rep, like whatever you're hiring for. If you're hiring multiple positions on a regular basis, you should go ahead and create it once. So you're not having to spend that much time over and over and over again. Spend the time to create it up front versus having to do it every single time you're getting a new hire. That's going to save you so much time and so much money. So yes, it may take some time to set up, but ultimately you're having so much more time that you're spending or your team is spending to go over the same thing every single time. Another thing I hear people typically say when I mention a company orientation is that they are lost. They don't know where to start. They don't know what to do. And they kind of get stuck in that overwhelm spot and they don't really get out of it. So they stick with the same thing of either not having one or basically repeating it over and over again. And the typical one that I see is typically having like a phone call or in person, and they're just going over the same things. And you could totally document what you say and make it digital. You don't have to sit there and get stuck in that overwhelm. What you want to do is focus on what they need in order to get set up for success. So instead of thinking of what do they need for the first 30 days, when it comes to the orientation, you just want to think about what do they need to be fully set up on in order to be set up for day one. So focus on just being set up for day one. Like, what are all the tools? What are the logins? What is all that? What is the software? They need to know about the software. Like, what does the software do? What do they like? What's your booking software? How do they function with the mobile app? How do they, get to your shop? How do they get supplies? Like, how do they clock in? What is that? What does it look like? If they need help, do they have a mentor? Are they reaching out to a certain person? If they have questions, like who are they going to go ahead and reach out to? Focusing on just that setup, focusing on the stuff that they need to be set up for success is going to help you just really narrow your focus onto a few things that you really need to talk about. And that is where you should start for your orientation. So it's going to happen in phases. It's not going to be all done from the jump right away, right? It's going to take time. But in the meantime, while you're creating it or while you're figuring out what you need, start with having them schedule an appointment. You could have them schedule a phone call. This could be your orientation phone call. We call it a welcome call. This is where we typically make sure that they are into the booking software, they're into the payroll software, they actually have been able to log into the booking software, they understand the booking software, they understand how to read a job order, they understand when they get paid, how often they get paid, they know who to reach out to, what a typical day is, they know where to, they know more of what a customer may expect, what their expectation is in the role, and that's typically what you're diving into that orientation, right? So you could do that on a phone. Again, that's kind of like your phase one, right? Your phase one rough draft is to get it done in an appointment of some type, whether it's a phone call, a Zoom call, or an in-person appointment. Their orientation, have it one of these ways. And then you can transition it to where you digitize it. You could even start off with recording that phone call and then using all the things that you're talking about and jotting it down. Hey, I mentioned this, I mentioned this, I mentioned this. It doesn't have to be that complicated. You could record a Zoom call and you could have that as your orientation, but just generalize it. Try not to call out dates. Try not to call out specific, you could blur out sensitive data. If it's like their social or their address or their phone number, you could blur that out, but then you could put that one orientation on autopilot, and then you could eventually improve it later on. Or in person, you could even record it if it's in person, or document it as well if it's in person. I definitely want you to get away from having to do manual pieces into this orientation. So figure out what you can put into it to digitize it. So if you are walking somebody through a specific software, again, record it. There's even tutorials for specific softwares that you can pull off of the website. So for instance, Launch 27. Instead of me having to record a video on how to set up their availability, Launch 27 has a YouTube channel where I can go pull that one YouTube video and I could put it into the orientation. And you'll get to that part where it is more digitized. We do have an actual template for your orientation. If that's something that you want to snag, you can go ahead and sign up for a free trial of our hiring on demand system. And on your onboarding call, we'll go ahead and give you that orientation PowerPoint. So you can go ahead and just customize it and put in the stuff. We already have all the prompts, the table of contents, everything that you really need to know already templated out for you. So you can go ahead and just make it so much faster. But this is going to streamline your hiring and help you reduce your turnover. After this, then you want to focus on your training, but kind of separate the two. Your orientation is just what they need to get set up for success. And then their training will come after. That's all the stuff that they need to typically be set up for the first 30 days. What does that look like? That will go into more of your training program if that's something that you offer. If you have employees, you'll probably have a training program. If it's contractors, you just want to make sure that you have everything really powered into your orientation. So it's a little bit more detailed with contractors and it's more generalized. Instead of saying specific, hey, you need to do this, it's more our top providers typically do this and have found it to be more successful, right? So it's just a change in the verbiage and making sure that you're all set up, good to go. Hopefully that was helpful. I know this was short. If you guys have kids at home, just like me, I have a little one who is going to jump in on our live, but I wanted to make sure to touch. Yes, baby. Okay, come here, I'll open it. Wanted to make sure that you guys had something to kind of dive into as far as the orientation. So today's goal was originally to dive into auditing your orientation, but not a lot of people have an orientation. So I figured I'd start with something here, and hopefully you guys could have some orientations created soon and go check out a free trial of our hiring on demand system. So you can go ahead and snag that orientation template. It's a PowerPoint that we have already done for you. We have 2 of them, one for employees, one for contractors. You can get that on your onboarding call. Sharm, do you guys have any questions before we hop off?
Well, just a general question for everyone. So, based on what you have discussed earlier, so would a digitalized or would a recorded video be best for an orientation, or would it be nice to have them on a hop on a Zoom meeting or a phone call?
Yeah, so for it's whatever your preference is. Like I prefer having a digital orientation. So I personally prefer where we, do it once, have an orientation like set up, and then you could have a welcome call that comes after that, and to where it's just a phone call, or you can have an actual appointment where they're actually meeting the people on your team. It really depends if you have an office or if you're like fully remote, because if you're fully remote, you still want to have that touch point, even though it's a digital orientation. You'd still want to say, hey, I'm so-and-so. I'm the customer success manager. Just wanted to reach out and say, welcome aboard. I'm going to be your mentor, so-and-so, like whoever that mentor is, or whoever's like going to be kind of the one addressing those questions later on would be the one who would probably be following up with them, even if it's a digital orientation. So you still want to have those touch points, but you're not having to spend that same 30-minute phone call every single time. It's just more welcome aboard, and kind of answering any questions that they had from the orientation. But you want to get out of that manual part. as much as you can. So you're able to streamline and you're able to just create consistency. Because if you don't have it streamlined, what happens is typically you may have a phone call, but you mention one thing a certain way, and then maybe you forget to mention it on the next person. And then maybe on the third person, everything's changed. So if you really want to have that consistency, and especially if you have different people who are doing it, as far as making sure that you have somebody who knows the same exact stuff, it's like somebody going around in a circle and telling a story. It's like the very first person that you tell the story, it's like by the time it gets back to you, it's totally different. It's the same thing with your orientation and your training and your practices. And that's why everybody really practices and preaches to make sure that you have a lot of your processes dialed in, whether that's your onboarding process, your orientation process, hint, hint, or so on and so forth. I mean, there's a lot of processes that we're going to have, but just making sure it's consistent all across the company is what's ultimately going to get your customers to have consistent results.
Thank you so much for answering the questions,
Yeah.
Fran.
All right, you guys have a wonderful week. Enjoy your Thanksgiving, and hopefully I'll see you next week. If you guys want to check out that trial, go over to hiringondemandsystem.com and then just mention this workshop, and then we'll give you your free PowerPoint for your orientation on the onboarding call. You guys have a good one. Bye.